Paul and Lee Key had each other. And then George wrote a song. So, they could go in with 3, 4 songs per record. So it's not like they had to write 10 songs. And also, today, some records have 15, 20 songs on them because of CDs or post-CDs or whatever. And so they were shorter records. I mean, they were 30-minute records. And they split up the songwriting. Some periods, Paul had more songs, and so my dad could kind of sit back and only bring a couple. And for some records, like Rubber Soul, where my dad really, had the most songs on it.
Right.
So it was kind of a perfect chemistry in that way. So it kind of explains it a little bit, but obviously it's the quality and the innovation.
The level of the songs.
The level of the songs, but also the innovation, the fact that they're not repeating themselves.
Right.
Like every record is kind of a revelation, and it's sort of like a genre in itself. And then they don't go back to that; they go on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Each new innovation is like a new period, and it kind of marks the whole period of the history of the counterculture, the music culture. So yeah, it's really impossible to explain. But I will say the fact that they had each other and they didn't have to write 10 songs each definitely is a clue as to how they got it done.
Okay, so Sean, what are some bands or artists that you like that people would be surprised that you like?
Well, I think people are very surprised by my musical taste. I remember I did one of these kind of 10 favorite vinyls for some cool British publication, and I saw comments about it that were just actually kind of brutal. Like they were almost mad as if I was pretending to like those records.
Like what?
Yeah, and I understood that because my taste is really broad.
Sure.
I mean, if you look at, I think I'm very odd in that way. Well, when I was young, people would say, what kind of music do you like? And you're supposed to say, oh, I like reggae or something, like a genre. And I never felt like I liked a specific genre. I always felt like I liked something at least from every genre. Because there's always something amazing, The best bluegrass records, or the best country records, or the best prog records, or the best, punk records. There's always something great from each genre. And I can't even think of a genre that I really don't like. There might be some obscure, EDM genres that I'm not into, but so I really like a lot of music from, India, from the Middle East, from Turkey, from Greece, like, psych bands from Greece from the 70s. I have a lot of Ethiopian, Ethiopian jazz. And I'm a big prog fan, which I don't think is a surprise to people unless I have this quote
by the pools.
Psychedelic band. But yeah, I think I just made up that word because people want you to call yourself something.
What's a psychedelic band?
Yeah, it is a little bit, but whatever. All those labels are silly. But one of my biggest records that people maybe don't expect me to love is Intermounting Flame by Mahavishnu Orchestra. And that changed my life. And I think it changes my life every time I listen to it. I was trying to figure it out the other day. I think it's something like that. But the thing is, it's like, dong, 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 and you think it's going to be go, 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 go. But it actually comes in, it comes in as this weird shuffle beat. And it's really how that song, to this day, like I've heard it 10 million times and it completely blows my mind every time I listen to it. Yeah, so a lot of jazz stuff people don't expect because I can't play jazz because I never practiced. But I do love, a lot of jazz stuff. But actually my favorite jazz records are probably, I don't know what they call it, like free jazz or something, like Live Evil, On the Corner of Miles Davis's like funky jazz records, the freeform ones. Those are my favorite with like Jack DeJohnette on drums. But I also I love Eric Dolby, I love John Coltrane. Out to Lunch is one of my favorite jazz records. So yeah, I really do enjoy a lot of different stuff, to be honest. And I sincerely do. And I can imagine why some people might think I'm making that up, but it's just the way I am. Especially with the internet, now you can listen to anything, So I don't know why you, kind of confine yourself to one country or one time or one genre. There's just so much available.
I have 3 teenagers, so I know kind of the listening habits. And to them, it doesn't matter when something came out because of the way that people
was growing up
Yeah, it's insane.
is really hard for me to accept.
Yeah,
But when I remind myself that, it explains a lot about the way they view a lot of that music. It's from another time, you know. Whereas the 90s stuff seems like yesterday to me. You know, it still seems like, oh, grunge is this new kind of genre. You know, yeah. And I do love all that stuff. I mean, because I was born in 1975, so, you know, I was sort of into,
I mean, grunge would be right when you were teenagers.
exactly. So I was sort of like too young to really be into Van Halen. Like I knew that they were great players, but I learned about, I learned to have respect for like Alex Van Halen's famous drum intro to the Hopper Teacher later when I really wanted to play. When I was young, that seemed kind of cheesy to me. And so when Nirvana came out, it was just like, this is the answer.
Yeah.
This is the antidote to all of this cheesy stuff. They just seemed to slice through it with a knife, and it was over.
I watched an interview with Kurt Cobain the other day with Nardwuar, you know Nardwuar?
Yeah.
And
I mean, I bet Nardwuar knows. He knows everybody.
so he interviewed Kurt and Courtney and Chris. It was 1993, I think it was, after the show. And Kurt's eating pizza as he's doing the interview, and he doesn't know who Nardwuar is.
Yeah.
And Nardwuar was being his normal kind of.
Yeah. Like I've researched you.
He's
Better
asking
than
all these
you
weird
research yourself, yeah.
all these weird questions, but Kurt is kind of dismissive at first, and then he acts like he's interested.
Yeah.
Then he's dismissive, and Chris Novoselic is acting completely crazy. And then Kurt's smoking, and I was thinking to myself, oh my God, no one would ever be like this. This is so great.
Yeah.
No one would ever be like this in an interview, eating a slice of pizza.
Yeah.
And having a conversation.
It was so real.
It was so real.
It just cut through everything.
It's like.
I even feel that way about the Wu-Tang Clan. I know it's unrelated to Nirvana, but they are another iconic movement from the 90s. And these personalities like Old Dirty Bastard, like he was so wild and free and unhinged, but also very sweet. Like he wasn't, you know, he wasn't an asshole, but he was so out there. And it just makes me feel like, you know, not to put anyone down specifically, but it just seems everyone is so professional and kind of corporate now.
Yes.
Even the quote unquote, like, I'm the crazy rapper, you know, it all just feels like their agents are like waving on the screen, you know. And I just miss those days when like there's Kurt Cobain and Old Dirty Bastard. It just felt like the leaders of the culture were very real people.
Yes.
And artists who were unapologetic and just actually anti-establishment, and also really cool people, like actually, you know, in many ways role models. I mean, I know ODB had his behaviors that were probably undesirable, and so did Kurt, you know. But the spirit I admire so much. They were both beautiful people, and they were both deep artists. I don't know why I'm comparing and contrasting ODB and Kurt Cobain, but in my mind it's similar. Like I had the same thought that you had when you were watching the Nardwuar interview. When I watched ODB and him talking, it's just like, man, MTV didn't know how to handle this guy.
No.
You know, it was just so unhinged.
Well, when
in
did
the most
everything change?
beautiful
When
way.
did everything get corporate? That's what I can't figure out. I think the internet made everything corporate.
Well, I think it started before that. You know, I never want to put anyone down because even though I am a very cynical person, every time I've read or seen myself speak negative about somebody in music or in art, it just sounds stupid to me. Because it's like, who am I, you know, on some level? It always looks uncool to me when I see myself like that. But I will say, like, not to put anyone down, but for me what happened is the Backstreet Boys came out, then NSYNC, and then we had Britney Spears, and suddenly the artists that were making the most money were more of a construct. You know, they had writers, they had image consultants, they were actually conceived of as a band, for example, you know, the NSYNC kind of band, before they even had the band members. It's a lot more like what K-pop does today, that kind of formulaic thing.
Yeah.
So, you know, I remember seeing it happen, and, you know, I remember going to...
That's literally corporate.
Yeah, and I remember, you know, being at festivals where Radiohead and the Beastie Boys, you know, were headlining back to back, and just feeling like this culture is the culture I belong to, and I felt so good about music at the time, and I
this is all, but that's all pre-internet pretty much. The internet
Right.
really was started right
Yeah.
when those,
It could get different, but I'm just saying, it was a surprise when Backstreet Boys were outselling the Beastie Boys.
yeah.
It was like, oh, I see, well, this kind of more pop thing, there are a lot of people out
Especially
there
since
who
the
want to hear
Backstreet
this.
Boys and the Beastie Boys sound so much alike.
Well, I used to denominate different aspects.
Yeah.
But what I think the internet has done for sure, if we want to talk about the internet's effect on music, is it has downgraded the position of music in our society.
100%.
Yeah. So what it's done is it's, there's an upside to it. It's made music infinitely available, essentially for free to everybody. And that's really great in terms of consuming music, But in terms of the place that music and musicians hold in the sort of hierarchy of society, I think we've taken down many notches. And honestly, I think in a way the music industry was a guinea pig or a canary in the coal mine. And now, all this stuff that's happening with streaming and Netflix, and people are saying, why does Netflix make 12 movies that cost $200 million each and no one's even heard of them?
Right.
It's because what the internet does is it sort of makes everything less valuable, less precious. It makes art less valuable. Not just money-wise, but it means it's less important to us as a society. No one cares about Hollywood actors, no one cares about movies, no one cares about music the way that they used to. I mean, obviously we still, musicians are still loved by their fans, and that's great. But, so I do think that the internet has been bad for the position of artists in society.
Even since I started doing YouTube 10 years ago, we've talked about this YouTube 1.0 in 2006 to 2016 or so. I started
Yeah.
in 2016.
Yeah.
And there was a charm to YouTube 1.0 where it was the cat videos and those crazy shred
I
videos
love
and
that.
things like
That
that.
internet seems like the 50s now.
It does, right? And so I'm always thinking to myself, how do I always retain? That's what I loved in YouTube, is YouTube 1.0. How do I retain that in what I do?
Yeah.
And it's just by, I don't have any corporate sponsors. I don't, I make my interviews about whatever. If I interview somebody, I make videos on anything.
Yeah.
And,
Which is an argument for why it's not a net negative overall. It's just transformative, and it's repositioned, the hierarchy of musicians and music. But there are really good things about it. I mean, you couldn't have had a music show with millions of followers, in the 90s, unless you were on MTV, and then you would have been forced to kind of,
that's right.
fillet the corporate genitalia. I don't know if I'm allowed to say that. This is a YouTube, we can say that. And also I think, to be optimistic, I think for me it's incredible to be able to consume music from all over the world and make playlists that just, I've got, Lebanese, ballad playlists, and I've got Indian costume playlists, and, weird hip hop stuff. And it's such a treat for me. I can't imagine if I was a 12-year-old musician, just starting, the amount of inspiration and education you can get from just listening to anything you want to listen to. On paper, that to me sounds like it's going to make a generation of the best musicians of all time, which I already think is happening. You look on Instagram, and there's just like an abundance of incredible talent.
It's insane. Some of the most brilliant players.
I know, and not, some who are simply just really technical and it's not that interesting, but a lot of people that I think are really profound
Yes.
artists. I mean, like Mono Neo or something,
Yes,
that guy's
exactly.
just a genius.
Yeah.
So I think there's an upside to it. Yeah, I could talk about this a lot. I mean, just in terms of how technology interacts with art, but also just industries in general. It's unpredictable, and it's impossible to make an assessment that's as simple as it's good or bad. And I think that's true of AI as well. I mean, obviously, the darkness of the AI industry right now, I think, is very clear, and I think the fear of it is warranted, and it's important to be skeptical of what's being kind of shoved down our throats. And I don't know if you noticed, but our whole album, the Delirium album, is a cautionary tale about AI, and it's about a runaway robot that is a paperclip maximizer but he's out of control, and so he's turning everything in the world, in the planet, into paperclips. And he's out of control, and the only thing that can stop him is to give him empathy, basically to give him feelings so that he wakes up and becomes conscious and realizes he doesn't want to turn every human into a paperclip. It's kind of goofy, but it's fun, and it's actually based on a computer science thought experiment. Like, what happens if you create the most powerful computer ever that can, self-improve and is smarter than any human's ever been, but you give it the wrong command, you could have a runaway problem. So I do take the warnings about AI seriously, but I also think that like every technology, like every technological revolution, we can't pretend to know exactly how it's going to play out. And, one thing I always like to point out, which makes me feel better, is that computers have been much better than humans at chess for a long time now.
Yes.
But it's not like anyone's going to see Stockfish, the best chess computer, play chess.
Right.
No one cares.
No.
But they are selling out. When Magnus Carlsen has a championship, there's lines around the block, and now it's on TV. Like chess used to only be on TV in Eastern Bloc countries. And now my nephew's like obsessed with he has all these chess heroes and stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's a really good sign, because if people only cared about mechanical efficiency and ability, then they would go and watch Stockfish play the other chess bot, But no one does that.
No.
And so I think that's really a good parallel for music and art and film and everything. Because no matter how slick these robots become or these computer programs become, I don't think people only consume art because of the technical construction of the art. I think that art is a kind of communication from human to human. And I think that the reason we seek art out is because we seek connection with each other. And there's no way to connect with a robot, for real.
I find that my kids, I've said this recently in a couple videos, that my kids and their friends are very anti-AI in that they don't use it, they're not interested in it.
Of course, all the young people are against it, and I think that's really cool.
And they don't even, first of all, they don't believe anything they see anymore. So they
can't.
They can't. And so they don't even look at stuff.
Yeah.
And any videos, they're like, oh, that's AI.
Yeah, I mean, my nephew isn't on Instagram even as much as I am, and I think it's really cool to see. There's been a sort of renaissance of handmade things as well. Like, I've seen a lot of young people doing like DIY fanzines and stuff, and getting back into analog photography. So, I think what's interesting is, and that's exactly what I was talking about. Like, we don't know how these things turn out, because one of the kind of side effects of this AI revolution is that I think the value of human-made art is going up.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so like the more AI slop we get, it's actually kind of lowering the supply of human things and making it more valuable. And as well as just making us appreciate human-made things a lot more. So, I try to be optimistic. I don't like to frame my worldview as negative, because I just feel like it's unnecessary, even if there's very good arguments for we're all going to die, which is always a fact. We are all going to die, right? Some way or another. Even the Earth is, the sun's going to go supernova at some point and consume the Earth. So, I think you have a choice to frame things positively or negatively, and neither are true or false. But I think you have an obligation to try to frame things positively. Well, it's been proven to affect the outcome. If you go into a situation, for example, if you've ever walked on a balancing beam, at the moment you think I'm going to fall, that's when you fall.
Right.
I mean, that's just how human biology works. So I feel like if we have any chance of surviving, we have to find a way to frame things more positively. It sounds really silly, but it's also because my mother believes in this idea of kind of positive projection. And I was really raised to believe that. But I don't think it's just me. I think it's actually, at least in psychology, it's proven to be true that those people who have a more positive framing for themselves and their lives have better outcomes. So I think we could look at AI and AI music and just think, oh, this is the last generation of guitar players, because pretty soon, Suno's just going to be able to play better than us. You could take that view, but I also don't think it's necessarily true. It's just a viewpoint. And I think it's equally possible that people appreciate real guitar players more than ever.
One of the interesting things about the guitar is that there's never been a plug-in that sounded really like a guitar. Guitar is one of the things that's very hard to create artificially.
It really is.
As opposed to any other thing that can be sampled. There are so many inflections, imperfections when people play guitar.
Yeah.
That there's literally no keyboard plugins that sound like guitars, really.
You're right, and I think it has to do with the guitar's never really in tune, and then the way that your fingers interact with the strings, the way that strings hang over and don't hang over each other is very specific to the shape of your hand.
Yes.
And how that interacts with the fretboard. So, even if you have a perfect guitar sample on a keyboard, you need like 20 layers for each note and the way they interact with each other to even try to mimic the way that, going to do that on a keyboard, it would be really
Well, it'd be a
almost
waste of time.
impossible. Yeah,
Just do it on
exactly.
guitar.
But I know, I do think it's interesting about recreating instruments. It's an interesting subject because, for example, I don't know if you've ever seen the Songs in the Key of Life documentary about Stevie Wonder's album. There's something that Herbie Hancock says in that documentary that I really love, where he says that, when Sins came out, that he and everyone else were trying to figure out how we could synthesize and fake, a violin or a trumpet or a trombone. And we were trying to figure out, can I make the synthesizer sound like a piano or something? And Stevie, he was saying, just took the instrument and started playing it, and using the sounds for what they were, and creating, some of the greatest recordings of all time. And I think that's amazing to realize that even Herbie Hancock was looking up to Stevie Wonder in terms of the way he interacted with those synths, because obviously Herbie turned out to be the greatest synth guy maybe ever later on.
Yeah.
I think that's really deep because it shows that trying to replicate instruments is sort of pointless. As you said, like just play the guitar, play a trumpet. But what's beautiful about synthesizers is their uniqueness. And I would even say the same thing about sampling. Like sampling isn't good when it just sounds like you're playing a recording.
Right.
But sampling is good when like you sort of use the quirkiness or the uniqueness of that format. And you can kind of hear when it repeats in a weird way, or you might have like chopped it in slightly a wrong place that gives the whole thing an interesting swing. It's about the quirkiness that makes all of those new music technologies musical. Because otherwise, you got the real thing.
I met Herbie one time, it was at the NAMM show in January, and he came to go to the Roland booth to check out all the new keyboards. And it was Roland Chord, it was Chord. And at 85, he wants to see what's the latest. Hey, what do you think of that? I'd like to get one of those to check out. It's like,
That's so
this is
cool.
amazing. He's still going to look and see what the new things are.
That doesn't surprise me. In fact, the only time I ever got to say hi to Stevie Wonder was at a NAMM show.
He was at NAMM too.
I think he was playing the Crutari thing. It's like a hammery stringed instrument, but that's laid out for a piano.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
I think it's called the Crutari.
Yeah.
But yeah, those guys, Herbie and Stevie, they're kind of the Mozarts of America of that generation in a way. Just in terms of prodigal genius talent that's unexplainable. I really look up to those guys a lot.
I interviewed Greg Florentines, used to play with Steve Wheeler when he was first dating his teenager, amazing keyboard player. And he played a lot on the Thriller album. And I said to him, Greg, it's a good bass on the song Thriller, right? He's like, yeah, keyboard bass. I said, so you didn't sequence any of that? He says, what do you mean, Greg? Sequence? I'm not going to sequence. I played that thing all the way through.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
8 minutes of it every
Yeah. Are you talking about
Yes.
What is that on Thriller?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just, of course, man. 'Cause it wouldn't sound the same if it was a loop.
No.
That record,
He told me the more he got into it, the more he was like getting
yeah,
in the pocket and
yeah.
as it just kept going.
I mean, that record Thriller is just, it's unbelievably great. Off the Wall and Thriller together, like as a pair, they're just incredible.
Yeah, I heard a couple tracks that didn't make Thriller that were from that time period. Some of those the other day.
Are they public?
They're not public. I've never heard it before.
Yeah.
And I've played a lot of stuff. And he around me is
I can't believe that there's unreleased
Yeah.
tracks from Thriller.
Yeah.
I've heard the demo for Human Nature, which is pretty amazing. It's in fact like the guys from Toto wrote that. And that song, the bridge, the way it modulates in the outro is so beautiful and sophisticated. Unbelievable. Yeah, and I actually was listening to that just the other day and just thinking about how there was a time in music when a song that sophisticated was also on the most popular record on the planet. It doesn't seem like we're there anymore.
No, we haven't been there in 25 years, 30 years, 40 years.
Yeah. I mean, and you know, I don't want to sound like an old fuddy duddy because there are sort of natural cycles with what I guess would say I call smarter music. You know, because if you look at like, you know, even the Beatles, like they got to Sgt. Pepper's, which was like super elaborate, and Day in the Life is like a very intricate, you know, elaborate song.
Yeah.
Strawberry Fields and Day in the Life are very elaborate. But then they kind of like got more rootsy again.
Yeah.
But then, you know, the whole thing that happened with like Yes and, you know, Gentle Giant and all these prog bands, there was a reaction to that. And like suddenly everybody just wanted punk and punk rock. And then in the 80s, I think there was a moment where music got more sophisticated again after people got kind of maybe tired of punk a little bit, you know. Even with Peter Gabriel and,
That's right.
you know, that stuff was like #1 again.
That's right.
And then we had all the heavy metal guys who could basically play Bach in their sleep. You know, they were tapping, all the hair metal guys. And then Nirvana comes along and just destroys them with just pure, raw, you know, coolness.
Yep.
And so, you know, maybe there'll be a resurgence, a renaissance of sophisticated harmony again, you know, but also maybe not. But I feel like, I mean, especially when you look at Instagram, there are so many young people who just can shred through all the jazz standards and all the rock stuff. Like there's a whole generation of young musicians who are technically more gifted than anyone I've ever seen.
They just need to be able to write some songs that connect with people.
Yes, and that's harder
That's
than
the
ever.
hardest. That's the hardest thing.
But what do you think about that? Because this is something I think about a lot. Because I remember when I was young, you know, MTV was just this thing that was always on. You'd go to someone's house and MTV would be on. And I didn't like a lot of the hits of that month or the summer.
Yeah.
But I remember just knowing what they were.
Everyone knew
And so
what
you
every
went to
song
a
was.
club and the hit would come on, like we were all kind of sharing a moment in time.
Yes.
Whereas the internet decentralized culture so that, you know, there's something nice about it that you can listen to whatever you want and you can find your group of weirdos who listen to your niche of music or watch your niche of manga movies or whatever, and you can kind of have your little clique. And they don't even need to live in your town, it's just a group of people that like the same thing. But the problem is there's no pulse anymore. People used to say like, oh, that artist has their finger on the pulse. But now there's like a million pulses.
Right.
So the fact that humanity itself, like globally, doesn't have a culture pulse anymore. And shockingly, before the internet, it was more uniform. I mean, when the Beatles happened, that was literally a global mania.
Global phenomenon.
And the whole planet, for the most part, shared this revolution of music. And everyone sang the same song. And I don't know if that's possible in a world where we're not all listening to the same channels.
That's
Algocracy.
I've not heard that term. You just make that up.
Just heard that.
But also the fact that kids listen on earbuds and headphones all the time, so they don't even share music through speakers.
Yes.
So don't
I didn't think about that.
I've said to my kids, hey, you want a stereo for your room? No, why would I want a stereo?
Yeah. They don't want you to know.
I have no idea what they listen to.
That's interesting.
The only time I ever hear music is if their friends are hanging out and they throw a record into the speaker and listen to it. That's the only time I ever know what they're
So
listening to.
this is going to sound super boomery of me. I'm even upset that the video games don't let you play two-player games in the same room anymore. Now you have to be online and your friend has to have another console in another room or another house. And so when you play through a game together, you're not even hanging out anymore. You're, like, you don't even have to deal with who's gonna order the pizza. You don't have, you know what I mean? There's not even that level of like the physical world of being a friend with somebody. Or oh, did you flush the toilet? Like, you're not even in the same country necessarily. And it's
Sean,
scary.
you're not even a boomer though.
Well, but you realize the kids, they say boomer because it just means you're old.
Right.
I don't even know if they're aware that Gen X is a separate generation. They just, you know, if you're not on Snapchat or something, you're a boomer. But actually, that was the most boomer thing to say because I feel like they're over Snapchat now. But
That's actually not true. I can
okay.
attest to that.
Well, yeah, I guess. But I guess what I'm saying really is that what scares me is that I used to be kind of anti-MTV in a way. You know, like, oh, MTV is just so mainstream and corporate. But I miss it now because I feel like there's no town square or campfire where we can all go and kind of at least know where culture is.
Absolutely.
In fact, there might be no place that culture is because there's no single culture. There's cultures, and they're all over the place. You know, and of course, certain people manage to break through and resonate with bigger groups for periods of time, but it's never like Michael Jackson Thriller.
That's right.
It ain't like that. And I think that was really good for humanity because it kind of connected us. It made us family. It was a family of people who experienced the same music and movies at the same time, and we kind of shared that culture together. So it does scare me actually, you know. The cinema thing scares me too. It's the same kind of thing. There are no really culturally defining big films right now. I remember going to school, and if you hadn't watched a certain film, it was like you might as well just leave the school because you were such an alien. I mean, you have to watch a film and talk about it with your friends. Whereas now it's like there's so many shows, and everyone's like, "Oh, have you seen this show?" I'm watching. It's like
I never heard of that.
Yeah, and then in terms of these big Hollywood movies where they're trying to get that effect where it's just a moment, a cultural moment, they don't seem able to do it.
Well, it's interesting because the last couple of big movies that came out last week
Yeah.
were both by YouTubers.
The big ones, right? They were independent.
They were independent.
Yeah, that's cool.
But the YouTubers, the people, and Markiplier had one 6 months ago. He did a horror film, and he has his, whatever, 38 million followers on YouTube.
Amazing.
These people have built these massive
Yeah.
platforms.
That outsold the Hollywood film.
That's right, because they develop their own people that are all into the same things, kind of like music used to do, except now it's through YouTube.
It's organic. So what do you say to young musicians? Because it's funny because on the Primus tour, with the Delirium, we have this like VIP meet and greet where people come and ask us questions, and so many of the young people say, "Do you have any advice for a young musician?" And you know, what do you say to young musicians? Because they're not entering the same field or universe or arena that or it doesn't even exist anymore, the one that we grew up with. Do you say something like, well, you better learn how to run a DAW